Sonic Frontiers is not even a month old, but it's already made big splashes within the Sonic franchise and the larger Sonic community. We've seen a returned focus to storytelling, more attention given to Sonic's friends, characters being more than just small traits that are overplayed to the point of annoyance, new gameplay for the first time in quite some time, I think since Lost World, with the open zone, open world mixing in with the cyberspace. Sonic Frontiers has been making a lot of bold statements, and it's made a lot of fans and newcomers very happy. But apparently this wasn't enough for Sonic Team, because very recently we got an announcement saying there's going to be updates to Sonic Frontiers, DLC style updates coming to Sonic Frontiers in multiple waves with new modes, new interactions, and the most interesting, new playable characters with a brand new story. Yes! Yes! But there's still more, because yes, I call them DLC styled updates. Sonic Team has stated that these updates are coming for free. I'll say it again, for free, at no cost to the existing player base. The upcoming updates for Sonic Frontiers are all scheduled to be free. Now, I think it's quite clear why this is such an amazing announcement from Sega and Sonic Team. Whilst there have been a few Sonic games to receive post-launch support, the majority of this was in the form of patches, and usually not for very long. Some titles, such as Sonic 06, believe it or not, and Sonic Lost World, did feature downloadable content, some paid, some for free, that added some more action to the game beyond what was available in the base experience. But again, these were quite short and only around the launch window. But based on this advertisement from Sonic Team, they plan to support the game throughout next year. We know that the second wave is scheduled for Sonic's birthday, which is about the middle of the year, which means that wave 3 will be nearer the end, third or fourth quarter. So they're supporting this game for the long haul, which is great for the consumer because it means you're getting more out of the experience you paid for, and hopefully it's great for Sonic in general because this should be good support that keeps the interest in this title active far longer than most Sonic games are able to say. And whilst, of course, all of these updates are very nice to see with new modes, new ways to play and new features, the one I'm going to focus on for the rest of this video is the third and final wave with the mentioned playable characters and new storyline, because I think there's a lot more room to speculate on what they're going to do. And obviously, many members of the fan base, including myself, just take a look at my upload history, have had quite a few opinions on directions playable characters should go. So without further ado, let's dive into that. So, we're getting new playable characters, and in the graphic we can see Tails, Knuckles and Amy clearly on display, which would lead you to believe that these would be the characters on offer. That's still a very nice amount. At most in this, let's just call it meta time period, we've had 3 playable characters, and that was in Sonic Forces, where we had Sonic himself, Classic Sonic, and the Rookie. And as I'm sure most of you know by now, the Rookie is really just a slightly tweaked version of modern Sonic anyway, and then Forces Classic Sonic is arguably the worst rendition of that character we have ever had the displeasure of playing. So Frontiers, including Sonic as he's already in the game, is going to offer at the end of its life 4 playable characters. To what extent is a great question. Sonic Forces did get Episode Shadow, a free update, similar I suppose to how they're rocking with Frontiers, in which we got to play Shadow through remixed stages based on Sonic's campaign. However, Shadow didn't have any unique traits at all. He was flat out a skin for Sonic and could even play some of Sonic's levels because of that fact. And then, as I said, Shadow Sages were just remixes of the Sonic campaign. There were no new assets for Shadow's storyline. So there is a chance that we might see a similar model taken up for Frontiers, where Tails, Knuckles, and Amy are just skinned over Sonic himself, and the stages they play through, whatever form that is, are things we've already seen before, but in a slightly different way. However, I don't actually think that's what they're going to do, because unlike with Episode Shadow that came out, I'm pretty sure, at the same time as the game, these are the last wave of updates coming out potentially an entire year from right now. So they actually have development time being put into them, which is enough time, theoretically, to allow for new assets, new areas to play through, and maybe more importantly, to differentiate themselves on a gameplay level and animation from Sonic himself. Because it would be really strange to play as Tails but be unable to fly, or to play as Knuckles and be unable to climb surfaces, or to play as Amy and not use the hammer. So if we take this very hopeful, but I think realistic interpretation that due to the release schedule of Wave 3, there are going to be new resources, we'll have Tails. In the open world, being able to fly may not be as insane as it is in Sonic Adventure. I made a video in the past explaining why Adventure 1 Tails probably put Sega off using him in 3D games, because he just breaks the level design. But when you're in this open, expansive environment that wants to be explored, being able to fly over it doesn't really take away too much, especially if the flying isn't super fast. You're still getting to explore. If it was boost speed and flying, then yeah, you may be robbing yourself of the experience. But at the same time, we have already experienced it by the time Tails comes out. Either way, I don't think Tails' flight is something to shy away from, and hopefully it's something that Sega will look to include for his playstyle. In combat, he should be able to use his tails to mix up the animations, though functionally they might be the same as Sonic's. But the different part may be those specials, those animated cutscene-like attacks. They might be different. Maybe Tails will throw hordes of dummy ring bombs that can blow up over an area and hit multiple people without having to lock Tails into an animation, just as an example. For Knuckles, gliding is almost a no-brainer. So many open world games let your protagonist glide across the area as a form of progression. Obviously Breath of the Wild is one of the best examples for this feature, but with Sonic Frontiers, it shouldn't even be needed as a progression limiter and just be purely used for exploration in a way most gliders don't get the chance. Because for other games, gliding is something you unlock and use to get from one place to another, but then you have to work your way back where you came. Whereas with Knuckles, he can glide, but then start climbing up a surface. And climbing is another feature I think would be really cool with Knuckles to expand upon, as he should be able to climb more surfaces than Sonic without the need of those purple glass walls, which should open up the map in a whole bunch of new ways. His ability to dig, at least on the ground, would be very fun to include. Maybe he can search for treasures like he did in the adventure games, but on a way bigger scale. That could be fun in and of itself, because it plays right into exploring an open world. Even if not though, maybe Knuckles could have some sort of upgrade that he needs to collect, or just a collectible like the medals, the memory tokens, and one of the methods of getting them, instead of side-looping, is digging. Still fits into Knuckles' character quite well. He has so many cool ways of being used in this format that I couldn't even list them all if I tried. And of course, with combat, Knuckles was built to fight. You've seen the Frontiers prologue animation. Knuckles knows how to give them the business, so hopefully he would let us do the same when he's in our control. And lastly, Amy. Amy doesn't have as much 3D playable history as Tails and Knuckles, so it's a little bit harder to draw from her past, but in terms of what we know she could do, hammer combat would definitely be a no-brainer, an inclusion. Being able to hit enemies, maybe her normal attacks can hit more than one enemy at a time because she's swinging her hammer in huge arcs. And then she could throw her hammer, and we already know that Amy has the magical ability to recall and generate Pico Pico hammers out of thin air, so that shouldn't be an issue. Maybe they'll also bring back some of her traversal options, such as being able to float for a bit with her hammer spin. I'm not sure. Maybe they'll play more into her magical traits that usually aren't a big feature in interacting with perhaps world puzzles. Could be another method. I don't have as many ideas with Amy, to be fair, but as long as they gave her unique animations, it should still feel like a worthwhile investment of your time. Now, of course, those are just the 3 characters that are the easiest to assume, but just because it's what we've been shown doesn't mean that's exactly what we may get. A lot of people have been speculating if Sage herself is going to be playable due to her position on the graphic, and I'll say that if she is playable, then that means Sega really are pushing Sage. She's already a pretty important character to the story of Sonic Frontiers, and to go a step further and make her a playable character, that's the same sort of treatment characters like Knuckles and Shadow were given, and look how they're perceived by fans today. So that would be very interesting. If she were playable, I'm not sure how she would play. Perhaps it would be more of a shooter, not in the way that we have those bullet hell sections in Frontiers, more like a third-person projectile shooting cyberspace level. I'm not too sure. Obviously, I don't know Sage's full abilities yet, so I can't really nail down a specific playstyle for her. On a previous post, one of my viewers, Demon Deathcase, provided a possible way in which Sage could be handled for the gameplay, and they suggested that Sage might be the only playable character of Update 3, but her gameplay is about manifesting Tails, Knuckles or Amy's form to access their moves, which in a sense would mean you're playing as all 4 of the characters. It's just that Sage is the only one who's really there, and she's borrowing the appearances of the others, but from a gameplay point of view, you would still be using all the characters, and this can give flexibility to when the DLC is set. That could be a very possible way in which the DLC is handled, though perhaps from a story point of view, not everyone would be happy with that. Shadow the Hedgehog is usually included in events like this. I'll find it very strange if he makes no appearance whatsoever in this new Cornerstone Sonic experience, especially since it's being extended for a year with further development. If he were playable, from a core mechanics standpoint, he could be a clone of Sonic, but I think it would be very, very important that his animations are all different. And even beyond that, give him his Chaos meter, allow him to use his Chaos abilities in combat and outside of combat, even if you're going to make the rest of him fundamentally the same as Sonic. Just give him those things at least to differentiate them. But what I think would be even cooler is don't give him the boost, and instead give him the spin dash. That should be interesting in and of itself. Oh, and of course, give the spin dash the same momentum feature that the drop dash has, but unlike the drop dash, let him jump out of it, please. Let him jump out of it without losing all of his momentum. Either way, Shadow obviously wasn't teased, so this is me just having my tinfoil hat crackpot theory, but just because he's not on there doesn't mean it couldn't be a pleasant surprise. Of course, the rest of the DLC was about the new story, and this will influence the playable characters to some degree, because one of the main questions we need to ask ourselves is, are we going to be getting a brand new play space, a new island or some sort of equivalent, or will it be taking place on the pre-existing Starfall Islands? If it is the former, then they could do whatever they want with these playable characters, because they'll be designing a play space just with them in mind specifically. If we're instead going back to the Starfall Islands, then they may feel hesitant to do things like Knuckles climbing on any surface and Tails being able to fly, because that might interrupt the flow of the open world. Again though, that's only if they structure it exactly the same. If their goal isn't to collect a certain amount of things and then activate a Titan, then it might not matter if Tails can fly to anywhere on the island at any point in time. So that's still up in the air. But the other question is, when does the DLC take place? If the DLC is going to take place before the end of Sonic Frontiers, then maybe it's something like a flashback. We can see what Knuckles was doing before he was captured. I know that the animation shows us that, but there's a difference between showing it and playing it. Maybe we'll see how Amy and Tails ended up getting captured and play through that. Or maybe we'll see what they're doing in the cyberspace prism. Maybe there is something going on in their heads that just isn't shared in the game. If instead the DLC takes place after the end of Frontiers, for a start we'll get to find out a bit more about what those characters were doing, learn more about Sage and Eggman's point of view, but also it would open up new playable experiences, because maybe the Starfall Islands have changed. Maybe we're going a couple months. Maybe we're not even on the Starfall Islands anymore. We're going somewhere else. Maybe Sky Sanctuary Zone is going to be playable. Who knows? The timing of this DLC, when is it taking place, is pretty important, because without going into any spoilers, some big things happen in the end of Frontiers that would have to be addressed if it took place after that ending. Regardless of the specifics, it's very nice to see that Sega and Sonic Team are giving Frontiers this extra time and attention. Hopefully, just like with Frontiers itself, it's a sign of good things to come from the Sonic franchise. But that is everything I had to say on the topic for now, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you have any ideas of your own that may be explainable behind the new information, then please let me know in the comments down below, and feel free to share this video to your friends to help the discussion grow. I hope you have a great day, and to see you next time. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.